Hello there. So I've just had my dinner, watching a few YouTube videos, as you probably do on a Sunday afternoon, catching up on probably a couple of days worth of videos. And Vince Ventuella, he's released a video on why people paint. So I was just having a little reflection.
Shut up and sit down.
Hello there. So why do I paint? I feel with painting there's a big spectrum of why people paint. You can go right up to the top to perhaps sell for big bucks, enter competitions, win competitions. Somewhere in the middle there's painting to play games, and right at the bottom there's just painting. You're not very good, but you give it a go. And I don't feel there's anything wrong with being at any stage. Only you can tell what stage you should be at. So, hobby journey, I've probably mentioned it a few times in some of my videos. I started painting, I'm guessing about 3 years ago. It was about six months before the Age of Sigmar release. It was March. Yeah, it must have been about so probably 2.5 years ago. I'll call it 3 years ago. Now, I've always suffered with I'm not a greatly creative person. I'm not naturally creative, but I like to be creative. So anything that I do, I may be of a reasonable standard, but I've had to work at it. There are things that I'm naturally good at. Painting is one of those things that you have to learn. It's something I enjoy. I mean, let's see what I've got. There we go. So if you turn something like this is just a grey bit of plastic with shapes. That's all it basically is. Still a playing piece for a game, but essentially it's just grey and shapes. Turning that into something wonderful. This particular one is quite easy to paint. It's just an undercoat, and then a dry brush of silver, and then some shading, and then you just pick out some highlights. I could probably paint that in half an hour, maybe an hour because of the shade. But turning it from one thing into another, that's something I like. And then I feel that once you get to a certain stage, you can then start teaching people. Sounds funny now, but when I first started painting, I really didn't know how to do anything. And I tried and tried and tried, and I couldn't understand why I wasn't doing very well, and every attempt I made was awful. I have a past history of painting model aircraft, so I suppose I thought, oh, I've painted before, this is going to be easy. Little did I know that there's a big difference between painting big, large fuselages and painting tiny detail. I mean, look at this. That's not finished. It's nowhere near finished, but you can see that, to give you a size comparison, it's the size of my fingertip. You don't do that much kind of work. Although one thing I've always said with aircraft is I enjoyed doing the cockpits, and I always wanted to take things a step further. So I wanted to colour in the screens and the buttons and things. and I often lost interest after the cockpits. So maybe it was a natural progression to go into figure painting. But I would join forums, and people would ask questions on the forums, and I would look at the questions and I would go, yeah, I've been in that situation before. So I could then post a response on how I dealt with it. So I feel that you've gone from the stage of painting up to passing on techniques. YouTube has been a great help for me, because there's other people out there that are doing the same thing. So I'm just closing the window. It is January and it's rather cold in the UK. Yeah, so YouTube's been a great help to me. Now I've started my own channel, and the main reason I started my channel was, although I learned, I found 3 years ago the resources that I needed weren't there. There are an awful lot of people doing videos, and I'm not being critical in any way, but people were doing these videos and they were going, look how easy it is, blah, 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 and they were pulling out these fantastic results. Now, what they perhaps didn't realise, it was so easy because they've been doing it for 10 years or 20 years or whatever. So the resources that I was after at the time was absolute beginning. Like I said, did I say? I had to have a lesson at the GW store on how to do layer paints. Now, everybody watching this video right now is going, oh, layer paints, they're so easy. Yes, they're all easy for us now, but think about the first time you did it. Did you honestly come out with the best model ever when you first did layering? So I found YouTube has been quite a good inspiration for me. My New Year's resolution is be brave. And by that I mean I'm going to try new things. It's a resolution that I can't break. It's a resolution that I if I didn't bother with it, I wouldn't push it as far as I could. But I feel that with this hobby, it's always something that you are always going to do something new. I've spent £250 on an airbrush. Prior to buying the airbrush, I bought one of the cheap ones before, one of those little eBay ones for £10, £20, whatever, and a cheap compressor. I didn't really know what I was doing with it. All I really used it for was priming. The whole thing just buggered up within about 3 months, and I ended up throwing it in the bin. Not a problem. It was not an expensive airbrush, but I learned from that experience. But I bought this airbrush. I say it's about £250, and I've realised actually there's nothing wrong with the airbrush. It was me. I didn't know how to clean an airbrush properly. As a result, I didn't get all the little bits of paint out. Yesterday, I've had a problem with the airbrush, where it was kind of, if you hold the trigger down at a fixed point, you'll see the spray come out, and then it comes out faster, and then it comes out slower. And I've cleaned and cleaned and cleaned and cleaned it, and it just wasn't sorting it out. And I was watching a video on how to get a cheap airbrush and turn it into a half decent airbrush. And one of the things they did was they got some Autosol. For those of you that don't know what Autosol is, it's primarily a car polish for metalwork. It's essentially a paste that acts like the really finest sandpaper you could possibly find. It's got the consistency of toothpaste. I suppose it basically is. It's really, really, really fine abrasive. If you polish your car metalwork with it, you'll find your cloth comes out black because it's actually taken off the top layer. So I got the needle of the airbrush, I popped it into a Dremel, and then I put it onto a low speed, a little bit of auto sol on a cloth, and just ran it down the needle. Fantastic now. Anyway, I digress. So one of the things I'll say, yeah, I've been brave, so I'm trying new techniques out. Excuse me. I find the more things that I learn, the more enjoyable the hobby becomes. The downside is, if you learn a new technique, you enjoy using that technique. If you find things that you can't use that technique on, then you get a bit bored again. Wet blending is not something I do very often. Dry brushing is something I've tried to come away from. I personally see it as I can't paint this, let's dry brush it. Dry brush has its uses, but not in absolutely everything painting, so I'm just going to get rid of a notification. But one of the YouTube videos I was listening to was a chappie, I've forgotten his name, I genuinely have forgotten, but he said about teaching. Now a situation came up where a chappie that I work with, he's painting, I think it's the Tamiya army figures. You can buy them in kits and you get about 10 of them. They're about 1 to 48 scale, 1 to 32 scale, not massive, but small figures. And he just said to me, oh, I just threw them all in the bin, I couldn't do it. And I just chucked a few easy questions at him, like have you been using washes to shade? Are you layering your paints? And he's like, no. And I said, well, there you go. So we're going to be setting up a couple of sessions where he's going to come around mine on a Sunday afternoon. I've shown him some pictures of the things that I do, and he said to me, oh, I want to paint like that. So it's a double bubble there. I might have got somebody into the hobby. I've certainly got already keeping someone in the hobby of painting miniatures. But also I suppose it kind of it feeds my ego that I now know I'm good enough to teach someone a basic skill. I'm not brilliant, but I'm good enough to teach, so I'm better than someone else. And that's been confirmed. I'm not a competition painter, but I do enter fun competitions, Games Workshop store birthdays, and I'll enter a competition, and I always enter with the aim of not coming last. Sounds a very low aim, but if I'm not the worst, then I'm not the worst. So I've got to be better than someone, and I don't mean that in a negative way. I'm always striving to be better. And I'll probably say get better quite a few times. And I think that's natural with anything. If you're a racing car driver and you win the Grand Prix series, but you've not won every race, then you're going to aim to win more races the next season. You are the best overall, but you weren't the best in every race. So I suppose it's natural to just strive to be better. I'm not out to be the best, although saying that, at some point in the future maybe I will be. I don't know how this hobby will go for me. Sorry, do you know what, I've made a note and I can't read my own handwriting. Okay, so yeah, I've mentioned YouTube. I started my own YouTube channel because there were some resources that I couldn't find, so I began to make my own. And even if the resource does exist, it's two resources are always better than one. I'm finding I'm learning techniques all the time, which can be applied in other ways. A good example is just before Christmas, I was watching a video on doing mustard metal. Now, I've always done mustard metal as typhus corrosion, and then dry brush it with riser rust. Is that the one? And then I'm watching a video where he puts this typhus corrosion on the wrong way round. And he even says, you know, Games Workshops tells you to do it this way, but I'm not going to do it this way. I can't remember. I'm going to have to look it up. I might have to do a video on it. But for me, it looks ultra realistic. It adds an unevenness to a blade or something. So yeah, you got to, YouTube will teach you. Groups is another one. Basically, if you go into a painting group and you have no interest in painting, it's not going to work. So by painting, it's the more social element. I don't get to play very often, although I am now trying to change that for 2018. But there's internet groups, and I found this community. Do you know what? I keep shaking. I'm sorry. I found this community to be probably one of the most helpful communities ever. There are people who do destructive criticism, but it's not very common, and you tend to find that people are more constructive in what they say. So rather than saying that's useless, they will say things like thin your paints, or try doing it this colour, or have you try learning the colour wheel, blah blah blah, whatever. I've never heard anyone go, that's absolutely awful. That's a lie, actually. I have, but they were just trolling. Another group that I've recently got involved with is Twitch, and I personally like the videos, both YouTube and Twitch, where you can just put something on, someone's painting and chatting, and then I can just be sitting here doing my stuff. I'm not even watching the screen, but I'm listening to everything that's going on. Twitch do things like music requests, so you can just go, all right, request a song, and then someone's chatting along, and all sorts of subjects come up. Two things that you said, Vince, which I want to pick up on. One is the word zero regrets, and I can really agree with that. I've done things in the past where I've gone, oh, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't spent the time on that. Wish I hadn't spent the money on that. I've got an awful lot of figures that I don't own anymore for one reason or another. Excuse me, sorry. But that's fine. I enjoyed my time with them. Sorry, got a bit of a dry throat and hiccups. I've always enjoyed my painting, and looking back, even when the models went wrong, I tell a lie, I used to paint many years ago. Would have been around about 2000. A friend of mine started playing Warhammer with dwarfs. I remember it was a time when the box set came out for Lizard Men and Bretonians. And I was a terrible painter. I really couldn't paint at all. And the guy in the Games Workshop store said, have you considered Chaos? Because if you can't paint, all you have to do is paint it black, dry brush it brass or silver, and red. And that's essentially all the three colours you need. Obviously there's other elements as well. And I built up a very large army very quickly doing that. And they looked appropriate. But even that, I mean, I got rid of it. I had a bit of a rage fit. I had all these metal miniatures on shelves, and one day the dog knocked into the shelf, and that knocked, because the shelves were made of glass, the top shelf broke, so everything came crashing down onto the next shelf. The weight of that broke the next shelf, and there were 5 shelves absolutely full of models, and they just went crash. And I just had a bit of a rage fit, and I just threw the whole lot in a box and took them down the tip. If I'd have known what they might have been worth now, I probably wouldn't have done that. But it's what happens. But I have no regrets. I have regrets about throwing them away, but I don't have regrets about painting them. Another thing that you said is little pieces of art. I think you tried to sort of dismiss that, but I would disagree with anyone that did. For me, art is anything that pleases you, um, anything that's aesthetically pleasing. You go into a gallery, there's some really expensive pieces of artwork that I would not buy, even if I had all the money in the world. I wouldn't buy them because they do nothing for me. Likewise, there's pieces of art that critics will say it's going to amount to nothing, and I'll go, oh, I like that though, I would buy it. And it's simply because it appeals to me. Um, I mean, he's nothing at the moment. He's nothing more. I'm really sorry about the bad light, but what's his name? Sly Marbo. I got him a few days ago, and I'm starting to paint him. And I like him because he's something different. And I'm coming round to 40k. I keep saying that I'm not going to play 40k because Age of Sigmar has consumed me so much, and I'm now starting to get into Nurgle since I did Archaon, the Nurgle head, and I quite like painting that. So I'm tempted, but at least with Nurgle I'm staying within Chaos. And then I was watching a YouTube video on painting some Star Wars figures, and there was a really interesting camouflage pattern. And I was talking to one of the guys. Forgive me if I get this wrong. I know very little about 40k. Is it the something Imperium? The guys, they look like regular army guys, and the way they were described to me was they're very, very cheap. If you like painting, get this army because you need to put the guys, they're just essentially cannon fodder, and you just send them in. You've got tanks and things, and I believe, I might be wrong, but I think that he's on that particular side faction, whatever. So if I went into 40k, this is perhaps the army that I would do. It's a little bit different, and it's obviously green camouflage is completely different from red chaos armor. So it's something. But I've just recently reclassified my painting as I paint what I like, which is something that I'm going to get to. But I mean, a guy with big muscles, that's kind of quite appealing because it's not something I paint that often. Well, I do because of chaos, but it's small and detailed. I've also been playing with a couple of Space Marines. I did a 9-day job last week, a couple of weeks ago, and I thought I could get away with not taking my hobby stuff with me. And I caved within 24 hours, and I spent loads of money on paints, and I bought paints. There you go, that's a regret for me. I bought common paints that I already own so that I could do some painting in Newcastle. And I just picked up these Space Marines. They were like £6 for 3. And I find that they're good fun to play with. I've been playing with layering. You can't really see it, but shading large flat surfaces is something I'm not so good at. But that's still a piece of art. Whatever you say about pieces of art, if you like that, then if it's aesthetically pleasing to you, then that's art. Oh, it's a big splodge on his bum. So yeah, they are small pieces of work. So what do I paint? I mainly paint Chaos, Age of Sigmar, anything that can fight for Khorne. I am looking at doing some Nurgle. Nurgle has techniques that I don't use very often. I quite like, I'm getting into models that have, like, say, a belly lighter than the skin. For example, the Blood Bowl Troll. So getting the colour transitions, and I'm really getting into going from one colour to another and making them blend. I do orcs and goblins on Blood Bowl armies, and basically anything I like. I've just bought a load of, I mean, obviously I pulled these up earlier on. These are the figures from Star Wars Imperial Assault. They're not the best figures I've ever dealt with, but one of the things I found with Age of Sigmar was people would go, "Oh, that's really nice. What is it?" And it kind of got annoying. So these two, even though they're not finished, you know exactly what they are. So it'd be nice for people to go, "Oh, that's R2D2," or "That's Darth Vader." So yeah, that's why I paint. It's just pushing boundaries. That's quite important to me. Doing stuff that I've never done before. Sometimes, I mean, I love my job. I absolutely love my job. But it can be mundane in that, let me give you an example. One of my rotors, I drive buses, by the way, in case you didn't know. One of my rotors is 7 round trips to one particular place. You then have a 40-minute lunch break, and then you drive 6 round trips. And then you could do that for 5 days a week. So that's what, 13 trips a day, 50, 60, 65 trips in a week. So you're visiting the same place 65 times a week. But within those, you then get people that you see every single day. Then you'll have, I'm going to just pause if I can pause. I can't pause. Right, I'm going to have to go for it. I've got a feeling someone might knock on my door. And, yep. There you go. Okay. Don't know why they just walked straight in my room. Sorry about that. Right, so, sorry. Right, I live in a shared house, by the way. So yeah, basically I could go out and I could have a bad day, and things do happen, even though you're doing the same thing every day. Car drivers on the road, people, you could just be in a bad mood in the morning, and my kind of job, if you're just in a bad mood, it will impact on your day. So I'll do 8-10 hours in a day, maybe 11 or 12. And I'll come home and I might just put one single colour on a model and pop a couple of YouTube videos on, and nothing else matters anymore. So I suppose the answer summed up there. I've mentioned it quite a few times. I suppose the reason I paint is the community that I belong to. There you go. There's a nice fluffy answer for you. Right, so I'm going to go and see what's been going on. I've still got to wash up my plates for my dinner, and then I've got to get a couple of hours painting in because I've been tidying my room up. As you can see, it's an absolute mess. The bit that you can't see is actually the tidy bit. I've just moved in the last week, and I've been building the room up from one end to the other, and all of this bit here where all my spray booth is and the desk here is lovely. The bit that you can see is the messy bit, but it's working up. So have a great week, guys, and I hope that this is a good video. I haven't rambled too much. The software that I'm using, I can't see, 28 minutes, so it's about half an hour. That's probably about average for me because I never know when to stop. So take care, guys, and have a lovely week.